Please tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I would love to interact with you legends. Now to the story. I don't really go on dates much, but this one stuck in my head for all the wrong reasons. It started like any normal swipe and match type of thing. He seemed normal, kind of funny in messages, not over the top, and he suggested we go to this cozy wine bar in town. I'd never been there before, but I'd seen photos online. It looked like a warm spot, dim lights, candles on tables, show music. Honestly, it felt safer than meeting someone in some random park or his place, so I said yes. The night of the date, I was nervous but also a little excited. The place wasn't crowded, just a few groups of people talking softly, clinking glasses. I spotted him straight away because he was already sitting down, phone propped up against a water glass. I didn't think much of it at first, just figured maybe he was texting or watching something while waiting. He waved me over, big grin, and I sat down. Right away, it felt weird. He had his phone angled toward both of us, and every time I said something, he repeated it louder, almost like he was making sure someone else heard it. I brushed it off, thinking maybe he was just awkward or had a habit of repeating. But then I noticed the little red light on his screen, and it hit me. He was live. At first, I thought maybe he was just on a call with a friend, but no. The comments were flying on his screen, little hearts and emojis popping up. I could literally see people typing while I was trying to order a drink. He wasn't even trying to hide it. He was explaining everything I did like he was a sports commentator. If I picked up the menu, he'd say out loud to his camera, "Okay, guys, she's looking at the menu now, probably going for the Rosa." If I laughed at something, he'd announce it. "She laughed. That's a good sign." I tried to play it cool, pretending not to notice, but inside I felt my face burning. Every time I moved, I imagined hundreds of strangers watching, judging. He leaned in close, not to whisper to me, but to narrate into his phone about how I smelled nice or how the vibes are going. Like I wasn't even a person, just content for strangers. The bartender came by and he even filmed me ordering. He narrated that too. She went with the Sauvignon, classic choice. The people in the comments were asking him to make me do things. I saw one that said, "Ask her what she thinks about pineapple on pizza." And before I even finished sipping my drink, he was already asking me that. When I gave an answer, he turned straight back to the phone, repeating it word for word like a robot. It was like being trapped in some bizarre reality show I never signed up for. I kept thinking I'd laugh about it later, like maybe this was just his weird attempt at being funny. But the longer it went on, the darker it felt. His followers weren't just joking around. They started commenting about how I looked. Stuff about my hair, my body, what they thought I should be doing instead of sitting there. He read them out loud like it was nothing, like it was part of the game. I tried to tell him I didn't want to be filmed, but he brushed me off with a smile and said his audience loved me. He kept saying audience, not friends, not followers, audience, like I was some character he cast in his personal show. I couldn't even relax in my seat anymore. Every move felt exposed. I crossed my arms, and he laughed into his phone, saying, "Okay, guys, she's getting defensive. What do you think that means?" The comments blew up again, feeding his ego. When I excused myself to go to the bathroom, I thought about just walking out the door, but my bag was still at the table. I went into the stall, sat there with my head in my hands, and just listened to the faint sound of him talking loudly into his phone out in the bar. I was shaking, not from fear exactly, but from this gross feeling that I wasn't even in control of my own night anymore. When I came back, he was laughing at something his viewers said. He pointed at me and told when I looked pissed off, like it was some joke. I wanted to scream at him, but my voice caught in my throat. The bar felt smaller, the candles felt hotter, and I realized there was no way to win. If I made a scene, I'd just give him more material. If I stayed quiet, I was still part of the circus. I grabbed my bag and said I had to go. He didn't stop me. He just turned back to the phone and told his audience, "All right, guys, she's leaving. What should I do?" They flooded the screen with comments as I walked out. Some said to chase me. Some said to let me go. Some joked about how fast I was walking. I didn't wait to find out which one he'd pick. Outside, the air felt freezing, but at least I wasn't under that spotlight anymore. I kept checking behind me, half expecting him to come running with his phone still recording, but he never did. I walked home, head down, praying no one from that stream would recognize me on the street or in real life. Later that night, I searched his username. I shouldn't have, but I had to. His live was saved. The whole thing. Every laugh, every word, every awkward sip of wine. It was all uploaded like an episode for strangers to replay. And the comments were still there, hundreds of them, dissecting me like I was nothing but a prop. I didn't report it. I didn't message him. I didn't say anything. I just sat there staring at myself on his screen until I closed it. That was my last date from an app. The weirdest part about this whole thing is how normal it felt at the start. I wasn't expecting anything crazy, just simple dinner with someone I've been talking to for a few weeks. She had this way of messaging where it always felt like I was the one being chased, like she was the one excited to meet. That made me drop my guard faster than I probably should have. We picked this trendy little restaurant, the kind of place with soft lights and tables way too close together, where you can basically hear every other conversation. She showed up late but made a big entrance, sliding into the seat across from me like she owned the place. She smelled expensive. Her nails were done. Her hair was straightened to the point it almost looked fake. I didn't care. I was just happy she actually showed up. The night rolled along pretty normal. Drinks, appetizers, laughing at stupid jokes. She was one of those people who kept eye contact just a little too long, like she wanted you to know she was in control. I noticed she didn't touch her bag the whole time, just her phone. It never left the table. She tapped it a lot, screen lighting up every couple minutes with new notifications, but I brushed it off. Everyone lives on their phone these days. When the bill came, that's when it shifted. She let out this sigh and gave me this look, kind of embarrassed, but not really. She said she forgot her card. My stomach dropped a little, not because of the money, but because it felt like a cliche excuse. But before I could even process it, she was already typing on her phone. She slid it across the table to show me a screen. It was a Venmo notification. She just sent me $500. She smiled like it was no big deal and said I should just cover the bill and she'd reverse it later. My brain relaxed instantly. It felt secure, almost too secure. 500 was way more than what we even spent. I told myself it was fine. I pulled out my card and paid while she kept scrolling on her phone. She didn't even look at the waiter. The rest of the night fizzled after that. She said she had to meet her friends, and I didn't argue. We hugged goodbye on the corner, and she disappeared into the street, phone still blowing in her hand. I checked my Venmo again on the way home. Still there, $500 sitting in my account like a cushion. I figured I'd wake up, send it back, and laugh about how weird the whole thing was. Except the next morning, the money was gone. Not transferred to her, not sitting in my balance, just gone. A notification popped up saying the payment was canceled. I tried messaging her, but the text didn't go through. Her profile picture was gone. I checked Instagram, gone. Snapchat, gone. Tinder, gone. She blocked me on everything overnight like I never existed. I called the bank, thinking maybe there was some error. They told me the transaction was disputed, and because it wasn't finalized, it was pulled back. Basically, I'd paid for the whole night with my own card, and her payment was just smoke and mirrors. She never had any intention of letting it stick. It sank in slowly, the kind of slow where you keep refreshing apps, convincing yourself maybe it's a mistake. But no, she was gone. I tried Googling her name, but nothing came up. The number she gave me wasn't even active anymore. I don't know if it was a burner or some app-generated thing, but it was dead. What made it worse was replaying the night in my head. Every little detail started looking different. The way she barely touched her drink. The way she kept her bag zipped shut the whole time. The fact she was constantly glued to her phone, probably talking to someone about me while I was sitting there thinking it was a good date. The weirdest part about this whole thing is how normal it felt at the start. I wasn't expecting anything crazy, just a simple dinner with someone I'd been talking to for a few weeks. She had this way of messaging where it always felt like I was the one being chased, like she was the one excited to meet. That made me drop my guard faster than I probably should have. The more I thought about it, the more it felt rehearsed. She probably had this whole thing scripted, down to the sigh about forgetting her card, down to showing me that fake transfer. She even overpaid on purpose to make it look legit. That's what made it sting. It wasn't random. It was calculated. I checked Venmo again later that week, just to torture myself, and her profile was deleted completely. No history, no proof. Just blank. Like she was never there. Meanwhile, I was out a few $100 and stuck with the memory of being played in the simplest, most humiliating way possible. I didn't even tell anyone about it for a while. How do you explain that without sounding dumb? Saying you got scammed on a date sounds like one of those cautionary tales people laugh at online, but it happened. The dinner, the fake transfer, the block. It all happened, and it felt like watching someone flip a switch, turning me from a person into just another mark. Weeks later, I still think about it when I walk past that restaurant. The candles, the cramped tables, the sound of her phone buzzing nonstop. I remember the way she smiled while showing me that screen, like she already knew I'd fall for it. And I did. I stopped checking dating apps after that. I stopped trusting those little coincidences that make people feel safe at the start. Because at the end of the day, that night wasn't about a date. It was about her running her scam while I paid the bill like an idiot. I never heard from her again. I knew something was off before the food even hit the table. It wasn't anything obvious at first. He was nice enough, cracked dumb jokes, ordered wine like he knew what he was doing, but there was this weird itch in the back of my brain I couldn't put words on. When we sat down, he looked me up and down like he was checking boxes. The compliment he gave me wasn't about me. It was more like approval, like I passed some kind of test. I thought maybe I was reading into it too much. First dates are always awkward, right? You overanalyze every move. I noticed he kept glancing at my jacket when I took it off, then at the skirt I wore. He asked me to spin once, just joking around, but I could see in his face he was dead serious. His eyes stuck to the details. My boots, my earrings, even my nail color. Halfway through the meal, his phone buzzed on the table. He flipped it over quick, screen down, but I caught it. The notification lit up before it disappeared. The name wasn't mine. It wasn't even close. It was another girl's name. At first, I thought maybe it was his sister or a friend. Then I realized it was his ex's name. I remembered because he mentioned her once in passing when we were texting, just casually, like she was out of the picture. Except the way he slammed his phone down told me she wasn't. I tried not to stare, but the longer I sat there, the more things started connecting. The skirt he said I should wear. The boots he texted me to bring because he liked the vibe. Even the hair parting he said looked better when I switched it. I thought he was just picky, but now my stomach turned over. It wasn't random. It was on purpose. He pulled his phone back later, thinking I wouldn't notice. He scrolled through photos quick, but his brightness was up too high. I saw faces flash by. Same clothes, same boots, same skirt, same poses, but it wasn't me. It was her. His ex. The realization hit me hard. He wasn't complimenting me because he liked me. He was checking me against her. He was dressing me up like a replacement doll. Every detail of me tonight wasn't mine at all. It was hers. I couldn't eat anymore. My fork just hovered while he went on about how I pulled this look off and how he liked how I matched his vibe. I could barely hear him. All I could think was how many times he had probably run this exact script before, molding whoever sat across from him into her image. He excused himself to the bathroom, and I finally grabbed his phone. Stupid, I know, but curiosity burned hotter than common sense. I tapped the screen, and it opened without a code. He hadn't even locked it. That made it worse. Like he didn't care if I saw. Her name was still in his favorites. I opened the contact, and my chest tightened. The picture staring back was her in the exact same outfit I was wearing. Same jacket, same boots, same nail color. He had even saved little notes under her name like reminders. Favorite drink, how she wore her hair, even her lipstick shade. It felt like I was choking. I dropped the phone back down and wiped my hands on my napkin like they were dirty. The walls of the restaurant felt closer. The music sounded louder. People laughing at other tables blurred into one constant hum, and I couldn't catch my breath. When he came back, he sat down all casual, but his eyes flicked to his phone like he was checking if I touched it. I forced a smile and mumbled something about feeling tired. He kept talking, ignoring the fact that I hadn't touched my food. I think he knew I knew. The way he leaned forward, the way his grin spread wider. He wanted me to know. That's when it clicked. This wasn't a slip-up. This wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. He wanted me in her clothes, in her shoes, in her skin. He wanted to watch someone else live out her shadow, like he could rewind and replay if he just controlled enough pieces. I couldn't even finish my drink. I grabbed my jacket, muttered some excuse, and left money on the table before he could argue. My legs shook the whole way out of the restaurant. I could feel his eyes on me as I walked to the door. Outside, the air felt sharp and heavy, like the night itself was pressing on me. I didn't look back, but my brain kept running circles. How many girls before me had he done this to? How many times had he rebuilt her from scratch, stitching pieces onto strangers until he felt close enough to believe she was back? I blocked his number before I even made it to the bus stop. The thought of his phone buzzing with my name sitting next to hers made me sick. But even now, weeks later, I can't shake the feeling. I still wonder if the next girl he matches with is sitting somewhere right now, dressed in my clothes, while he stares at her like a puzzle piece he's trying to force into place. I'll never step foot in that restaurant again.
Hey guys, really sorry to interrupt. If you're still listening, then you're enjoying the story so far. And if you are enjoying, then please hit that like button. That's all I ask of you. Thanks so much. Now back to the stories.
When I tell people this was the worst date of my life, they think I'm exaggerating. But I still get a pit in my stomach every time I think about it. It started like something sweet and wholesome. She said she wanted to cook for me. No fancy restaurants, no noisy bars, just for making dinner at her place. Honestly, I liked the idea. It felt simple, and it made her seem genuine. She gave me the address, and I showed up with a bottle of wine because that's what you do when someone invites you over. The place was a small apartment in an old building, the kind with uneven stairs and mailboxes stuffed with junk flyers. She opened the door wearing an apron, all smiles, hair tied back. The smell of garlic and something frying hit me instantly. It felt warm, homey. She let me in, and everything looked kind of cozy. A small living room, plants on the windowsill, mismatched furniture that somehow worked together. Music played low in the background, nothing distracting, just filling the silence. She led me to the dining table, already set with plates and candles. I thought I'd lucked out, finally a date that wasn't awkward or chaotic. But then I saw him. At the far end of the table, sitting completely still, was a guy. He didn't say anything. He didn't smile. He just sat there, hands folded in front of him, eyes following me as I walked in. She didn't introduce him right away. She just waved her hand casually and said, "Oh, that's my roommate." I tried to laugh it off, gave a little nod, but something about him froze me. He didn't nod back. He didn't blink much either, just kept staring like I'd already messed up by showing up. We sat down, and she brought out the food. Pasta, salad, bread on the side. She was chatting away, asking me questions, telling me stories, acting like this was the most normal thing ever. But the entire time, her so-called roommate sat at the table with us, silent, eyes fixed on me. I couldn't even focus on what she was saying. Every time I lifted my fork, I felt his stare like a weight pressing down. He didn't eat. His plate stayed empty. His glass stayed full. He just sat there, watching every move I made. At one point, I tried to make small talk with him, just to break the tension. He didn't respond. Not a word. He just tilted his head slightly, like he was studying me. She brushed it off, saying he was quiet and kept to himself. Quiet was an understatement. The guy radiated something heavier than silence. The longer it went on, the less it felt like a date and more like some kind of test. She would laugh at my jokes, but every time she did, she glanced at him like she was checking for his reaction. He never laughed. He never moved. His eyes didn't leave me, not once. I forced myself to eat just to keep things moving. The pasta was good, but it turned to glue in my mouth with the way the room felt. Every scrape of my fork sounded too loud. Every swallow felt like it echoed. She kept pouring me wine, but I couldn't relax. I just kept looking up and locking eyes with him across the table. His stare never softened. Finally, I excused myself to use the bathroom. I needed a break from that suffocating tension. On my way down the hall, I noticed pictures on the wall. Pictures of her. And him. Not roommates, couple photos. Arms wrapped around each other, kissing, smiling at the beach. Frame after frame with their life together, my stomach flipped. When I came back to the table, my hands felt cold. I sat down and she smiled like nothing was wrong. But I couldn't shake what I saw. This wasn't a roommate. This was her ex. And judging by the way he stared at me, maybe not even fully an ex. The rest of the meal dragged like quicksand. I kept waiting for her to acknowledge it, to explain, to give me anything. She didn't. She carried on with her stories, her questions, her laughs. He sat there, silent sentinel, eyes burning holes through me. At one point, her hand brushed mine as she passed the bread, and I swear his knuckles tightened. I caught it out of the corner of my eye. He didn't say anything, but it was enough to make my chest tighten. I wasn't just on a bad date. I was in the middle of something twisted, something I didn't understand. When I finally said I had to leave, she pouted like it was too soon. She walked me to the door, still cheerful, still acting like everything was fine. Behind her, in the dim glow of the candles, he stood up, still silent, still watching. I left as quickly as I could, the wine bottle still unopened in my hand. On the stairs, I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. By the time I hit the street, I didn't even care if I looked crazy half-jogging to my car. Later that night, she texted me, asking if I got home safe, like it was any other normal date. I didn't reply. I blocked her instead. But the image of him sitting at that table, unmoving, eyes drilling into me, hasn't left since. It wasn't dinner. It wasn't a date. It felt like I walked into the middle of a ritual I was never supposed to see. The date itself wasn't even that bad. That's the part that still gets me. How normal it all was, how unremarkable. He wasn't rude or creepy or even awkward. Just boring. We met at one of those chain restaurants with laminated menus and endless drink refills. The kind of place you go when you don't know someone well enough to pick somewhere meaningful. He talked a lot about his job. Something in sales. He complained about his coworkers, his boss, the hours, how nobody wants to work anymore. I smiled, nodded, and picked at my pasta. I'd already decided halfway through the appetizer that there wouldn't be a second date, but I wasn't going to ghost him mid-meal. I was raised to be polite. When the check came, he grabbed it before I could reach for my wallet. I said thank you, and he shrugged like it was no big deal. I actually appreciated that. No weird argument about splitting it, no macho insistence, just handled. I figured at least it ended smoothly. Outside, the air was damp, that sticky kind of humidity that clings to your skin after rain. The parking lot lights buzzed overhead, throwing halos over the puddles. I pulled out my phone to call an Uber. He noticed and immediately offered to drive me home. I smiled. That's okay. I already ordered one. He laughed, like I made a joke. Come on, I don't mind. I'm headed that way. I shook my head, keeping my tone light. No, really, it's fine. He frowned a little, but it passed, or at least I thought it did. He leaned against his car while I stood by the restaurant's front door, watching my phone screen as the little Uber car icon crept closer. I felt his eyes on me, though. Not glaring, just waiting. The Uber pulled up, headlights washing across the wet pavement. I gave him a polite little wave goodbye and slid into the back seat. He raised his hand like he was saluting me, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. I remember thinking that the night was officially over, a dud, sure, but harmless. Except it wasn't. About 2 minutes after we pulled out of the parking lot, I glanced in the side mirror. Behind us, maybe 4 or 5 cars back, was a familiar gray sedan. Same color, same dented bumper I'd noticed earlier when he parked. My stomach fluttered, but I told myself it was coincidence. He probably lived nearby, or maybe he was just taking the same route home. I forced myself to look away, focusing on the radio playing softly in the Uber. But then we turned left. He turned left too. We're at the gas station. So did he. Straight through a light where he could easily gone the other way, and still the same headlights in the mirror, 2 steady orbs heaving pace. The little prickle of unease started to spread through my chest. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting, that people share roads, that this was just bad luck. But when we turned into my neighborhood, quiet, dark, tucked between trees, and the same car followed, the panic really set in. I kept my face neutral, pretending to scroll my phone, but my hand was slick with sweat. The Uber driver hadn't noticed yet. I didn't want to sound paranoid, didn't want to accuse some random person and look crazy if it really was nothing. But I knew. I leaned forward, trying to keep my voice steady. Hey, could you take a different route? I just remembered I need to stop somewhere. He nodded, eyes flicking to me in the mirror. Sure thing. He turned down another street, one that looped around the neighborhood. The headlights behind us turned too. My throat tightened. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. The driver glanced back at me again. I think he saw my face because his own expression shifted. His posture stiffened, eyes darting to the mirror more often. We hit a stop sign. The gray car slowed a few houses behind us. The driver pressed the gas, a little faster now. We took another turn. So did he. I whispered. He's following us. The driver didn't argue or ask questions. He just nodded once and said quietly, "Hang on." He sped up, cutting through a few side streets, the kind where the road narrows and mailboxes blur past. For a few seconds, I couldn't see the headlights. My heart started to ease. But then, as we turned back onto a main road, they appeared again, farther back, but still there, steady and deliberate. The driver cursed under his breath. We passed a strip mall, half closed for the night. Without warning, he pulled into the parking lot, looping around to the back behind a dumpster enclosure. He killed the lights. The car idled in darkness. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. We waited. 30 seconds passed. Then the gray set and crept by on the road, headlights sweeping across the lot like a searchlight. He slowed down. My breath caught. He paused, just for a moment, then kept driving. We stayed there in silence. 1 minute. 2. The hum of the Uber's engine filled the space between us. Finally, the driver exhaled and turned the lights back on. "Let's get you somewhere safe," he said. His voice was calm, but his hands trembled a little on the wheel. Instead of heading to my street, he drove to a gas station under a flood of harsh white light. The brightness was almost painful after the dark, but it made me feel safer. He parked by the entrance and told me he wouldn't leave until we were sure the guy was gone. For 10 minutes, we sat there watching the road. Every pair of headlights that passed made my stomach clench. None of them were gray. The driver asked gently, "You still want to go home?" I hesitated. "Can you take me somewhere else first? I'll change the drop-off." I gave him a fake address, just a few streets away from my real one. He didn't question it. Just drove, slow and cautious, checking his mirrors the whole way. When we pulled up, I thanked him, probably 3 times, and got out. My hands were still shaking as I closed the door. He waited until I was halfway up the walk before pulling away. I stood there until his taillights disappeared. Then I turned, cut through a side alley, and weaved through backyards until I reached my own house. Every rustle of leaves made me jump. My legs felt like rubber. When I finally slipped my key into the door, I didn't even turn on the lights. I just locked it. Deadbolt, chain, everything, and sat on the floor, listening for any sound outside. Nothing. I checked my phone. No texts, no missed calls, no messages from him ever again. But I'll never forget that stretch of road, the way those headlights clung to us no matter how many turns we took. He wasn't trying to get me home safe. He was making sure I knew he could. That was the last first date I said yes to for a very long time. People always say online profiles don't match reality, but this one did. She was exactly like her pictures, actually better. The kind of beautiful that makes your brain stall for a second. When she walked into the restaurant, I almost didn't believe she was there for me. Heads turned as she crossed the room, heels clicking, perfume trailing after her. Her hair looked too perfect to be real. Her eyes locked straight on me, confident, deliberate. I remember sitting up straighter without realizing it, trying to look like I belonged in the same room as her. When she smiled and hugged me, it was practiced but warm, like she'd done it 1,000 times. Everything about her felt rehearsed, the tilt of her head, the rhythm of her voice. But I didn't care. I was too distracted. Her nails matched her lipstick. Her outfit looked like something from an influencer's feed. She even laughed in that short, camera-ready way that makes you think you said something clever even when you didn't. The first 15 minutes felt normal enough. Small talk about traffic, the menu, the slow service. She asked me what I did for work, nodded politely, then pivoted to movies and travel. I told her about a trip I took last year, and she smiled at all the right parts. She touched my hand once when she laughed. I felt that little electric jolt that makes you think maybe, just maybe, this could be something. Then halfway through dinner, she leaned back, smirked, and said she should probably tell me something. The tone in her voice made my stomach tighten. She reached forward, tapped her phone, and suddenly I noticed it, propped against the salt shaker, angled toward us. The screen glowed bright. A tiny red dot blinked in the corner. Words and emojis raced up the side too fast to read. She smiled wider. "So you're on Live right now," she said. "Hope you don't mind. It's kind of the thing my followers like to do. They're rating your boyfriend potential." I actually laughed. I thought she was joking. But she wasn't. She turned the phone slightly so I could see the screen better. There were hundreds, no, Thousands of people watching. My name wasn't on the screen, but my face sure was. The chat was alive, scrolling nonstop. He looks nervous. Cute, but seems like a people pleaser. He blinks too much. My throat went dry. I stared at her, waiting for her to say she was kidding, but she just smiled, adjusted the camera angle, and said, "Say hi to everyone." I muttered something that might have been hello, though it came out like a whisper. She laughed, bright, effortless, perfect for the mic, and told them I was shy. The chat exploded again. From that moment on, everything I did became material. The way I cut my steak, the way I shifted in my seat, the way I reached for my water glass. She narrated all of it, tossing little jokes at the phone like we were part of some talk show. Every time she laughed, I saw an own reflection in the screen trapped under the comments. Awkward, sweet but unsure, trying too hard. I wanted to stand up and leave, but my body wouldn't cooperate. It's like I'd been pinned there by embarrassment. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. She asked me questions that felt scripted. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Would you ever want kids? Then turned to the camera after each answer to analyze me for them. See, he hesitated, she said once, and the chat filled with laughing emojis. Every time I spoke, she interrupted to tell them what she thought I really meant. It wasn't a conversation anymore. It was performance. I was a prop. At one point, she told me to hold up my drink so the chat could vote on whether I looked confident. I lifted the glass, hands trembling. Within seconds, comments poured in. He's overcompensating. Cute but nervous. Looks like a guy who apologizes too much. She giggled, tilting the phone closer to my face. He's such a good sport, she said, like I'd volunteered for this. I wasn't even tasting the food anymore. My skin burned, my palms slick against the table. I kept my eyes on the salt shaker just so I wouldn't see the screen. The longer it went on, the smaller I felt, like the version of me they were describing online was replacing the real one sitting there. When the waiter came with the check, I thought maybe that would break the spell. But she turned to her followers again and asked, "So what do you guys think? Should he pay?" The comments poured in immediately. Yes, test him. If he doesn't, he's a 3/10. Make him prove he's gentleman material. She looked at me expectantly. I wanted to tell her no, that I wasn't playing, but I could feel all those invisible eyes waiting. The thought of them judging me, screenshotting me, calling me cheap, made me reach for my wallet. My ears burned as I slid my card into the check folder. I hated myself for it. She winked at the phone. "What do we think, ladies? Keep her or no?" I stood up before the waiter even brought the receipt back. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. She looked up, all fake pout. "Leaving already?" she said. "They're gonna think you're shy." "Let them," I said. My voice came out flat, unfamiliar. I didn't look back as I walked out. I could still hear her voice behind me, bright and cheery, telling the stream, well, that was interesting, followed by a wave of laughter from 1,000 unseen faces. When I got home, I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, just staring at the blank wall. My phone buzzed twice, friends texting to ask how the date went, but I couldn't answer yet. My mind kept replaying her voice, that red blinking dot, those comments moving like a swarm. Curiosity finally got the better of me. I opened my phone, searched her name. Her page came up instantly. Hundreds of thousands of followers. Dozens of clips. Her face smiling in every thumbnail. And there it was, the stream from tonight. I clicked it before I could stop myself. The video opened on the restaurant scene, my own face frozen mid-chew, eyes half closed, the worst possible angle. The chat replayed in real time, the same cruel comments scrolling by. People debating my vibe, my confidence, my worth. Some had timestamped their favorite parts. One clip had been cut and shared separately, her laughing while I paid the bill. The caption read, "When he still thinks it's a real date." I felt something twist inside me. Not anger, not sadness, just this cold hollowness. I stared at the screen until my reflection blurred with hers, her smile wide and perfect, mine small and tired. I shut my phone off and tossed it across the room. The silence after the click was deafening. For a long time I sat there, trying to convince myself it wasn't a big deal, that it was just the internet being the internet. But the truth was simpler and uglier. I wasn't embarrassed because strangers had laughed at me. I was shaken because she'd looked me in the eye, smiled, and turned me into content without a flicker of hesitation. I wasn't a date to her. I was an episode. And the scariest part, she'll do it again tomorrow. He got me with the dog. That's the only reason I even agreed to come over. I'd been on enough boring dinner dates to last a lifetime. So when he mentioned he had a golden retriever that loved meeting new people, I caved. Who doesn't want to meet a dog? He made it sound like the most normal, wholesome thing in the world. I showed up to his place with a bottle of soda and some snacks, trying to keep it casual. The building was quiet, one of those old apartment complexes with squeaky elevators and faded carpet in the hallways. He opened the door wearing a huge grin like he'd been waiting at the door for me. The first weird thing was the smell. Not rotten exactly, but stale, like dust in old books mixed with something metallic. I brushed it off, thinking maybe it was just the apartment being closed up. He motioned me in and I kicked my shoes off, expecting to hear the thump of paws or at least some barking. Nothing, just silence. I asked where the dog was, and he smiled even wider, telling me to come into the living room. I followed him, excited, and froze the second I stepped inside. There wasn't a golden retriever. There wasn't any live animal. Instead, arranged around the room like an audience were 5 stuffed animals. Not stuffed toys, taxidermy. Front and center was a big golden retriever, mouth open in a permanent pant, glass eyes staring straight ahead. Next to it, a smaller terrier, frozen mid-snarl. On the shelf behind them, a fox with its teeth bared, and above the couch, a hawk with its wings spread wide. In the corner, a cat crouched like it was about to pounce, forever locked in that position. My throat went dry. He walked in like it was nothing, waved at the dog, and said, "See, this is Bailey." I thought maybe he was joking, some dark sense of humor. But then he crouched down, scratched behind the golden retriever's stiff ear, and cooed like it was alive. He looked up at me, completely serious, and told me Bailey liked me. I didn't laugh. I couldn't. My whole body tensed, and I just stood there, trying to figure out what I was even looking at. The golden retriever's glass eyes seemed to follow me, catching the light from the lamp in a way that made them glint. He patted the terrier next, introducing him like a proud parent. I sat on the edge of the couch because I didn't know what else to do. The hawk loomed right above me, wings spread like it could swoop down any second. He sat across from me, totally relaxed, chatting like this was a normal night in. He asked me about my day, my job, my hobbies, but every so often he'd pause to check in with one of his animals. He'd nod like they were responding, sometimes even laugh softly as if they'd said something funny. At one point, he leaned toward the cat in the corner and muttered about me being shy. My stomach twisted. He wasn't even embarrassed. He was carrying on 2 conversations at once, one with me, one with his collection of dead pets. I tried to make excuses in my head. Maybe they were all his real pets once. Maybe this was his way of keeping them close. But then he poured me a drink, set it on the table, and asked if I wanted to feed Bailey. He held out a dog treat, placed it in my hand, and gestured toward the stiff golden retriever like I should put it in its mouth. I froze, treat sweating in my palm. He tilted his head, waiting, those glass eyes reflecting me in miniature. I forced a laugh, set the treat on the table, and said maybe later. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. The air in that apartment got heavier by the minute. The fox teeth gleamed under the lamp. The hawk's wings cast jagged shadows across the wall, and every time I shifted, the retriever's empty stare seemed to lock tighter on me. He started telling me stories about them. How Bailey used to sleep at the foot of his bed. How the terrier once chased a ball until it collapsed. How the cat still sneaks around the place. Each one he told, he looked at me like I should picture it happening right there, like the animals weren't stiff shells, but still breathing, still moving. I checked the time on my phone, heart racing. Only an hour had passed, but it felt like days. I mumbled something about needing to get up early, already reaching for my bag. He frowned at first like a disappointed kid, but then nodded. He stood, walked me to the door, and before I left, he turned to the golden retriever and whispered something I couldn't hear. I walked down that hallway fast, not daring to look back. The whole way home, all I could see in my head were those glassy eyes catching the lamplight, staring through me. Later, I told a friend about it, but even saying it out loud felt unreal. A date night, a promise of meeting a dog, turning into dinner with a room full of dead animals he treated like roommates. That was the first and last time I stepped foot in his apartment. I thought it was going fine. Nothing special, but not awful either. We met for drinks at a little bar near her place, one of those dimly lit spots with cracked leather boots and old photos on the walls. She picked it, said she liked how quiet it was. She was easy to talk to, funny in a subtle way, with this dry humor that made me laugh more than I expected. She told stories like someone who'd rehearsed them, but not in a bad way, like she practiced being interesting and actually pulled it off. She had this calm about her, the kind that makes you forget to check your phone or glance at the clock. When she smiled, it felt deliberate, like every expression she made was carefully chosen. After 2 drinks, she said we should go back to her place, just to hang out for a bit. I didn't overthink it. She didn't seem drunk, and I wasn't either. She lived just a few blocks away, so we walked. The air was cool, quiet. I remember her heels clicking on the sidewalk, steady and precise, like a metronome. Her apartment was small but nice, clean, minimalist, everything in its place. A beige couch, a gray rug, a coffee table stacked neatly with candles. The walls were mostly bare except for a single framed print of a forest, muted greens and browns. It didn't look lived in, exactly. It looked arranged. She offered me a glass of wine, disappearing into the kitchen. I wandered a few steps into the living room, trying not to snoop. My eyes landed on the bookshelf against the far wall. At first, I thought it was empty. All black, all uniform. But when I got closer, I realized it wasn't books at all. It was binders. Dozens of them. Thick, black binders lined in perfect rows, each with a white label on the spine. I leaned a little closer, expecting dates or maybe topics. Instead, each label had a name, first and last. David, Brian, Michael. All men's names, typed neatly, same font, same spacing. Alphabetical. I frowned, leaning back just as she called from the kitchen. Hope you don't mind red. It's all I have. Her voice was cheerful, normal. I told her red was fine and tried not to stare, but the longer I looked, the stranger it felt. The binders weren't random. They were too deliberate. She came back with 2 glasses and sat on the couch across from me, one leg crossed over the other. Her eyes followed mine to the shelf. "Oh," she said with a little smirk. "You noticed those?" "Yeah," I said, laughing nervously. "You really like to organize, huh?" She smiled slow. "Something like that." She told me she was into true crime, that it was kind of a hobby. I laughed and said, "Seems like everyone's into that these days. Podcasts, documentaries." But she didn't laugh with me. She just took a sip of wine, eyes never leaving mine. That's when I noticed it. A small gap on the bottom shelf. A space that looked like it was waiting for another binder. And right next to that space, at the end of the row, was one that looked brand new. Same black cover. Same neat white label. Except this one didn't have a full name. It just had my initials. Black letters, perfectly centered. For a second, my brain refused to process it. I blinked, looked again, hoping I'd read it wrong. But no, those were my initials, clear as day. My stomach dropped. I tried to laugh it off, but it came out strangled. "That's weird," I said. "What's with the names?" She didn't answer right away. She just smiled, slow and knowing, the kind of smile that felt like a test. Then she reached out and tapped one of the binders with her nail. A soft click against the plastic spine. "I put a lot of time into these," she said. Her voice was calm. Too calm. I waited for her to elaborate. She didn't. She just kept smiling, sipping her wine. The silence in the room started to press down, heavy and deliberate. I could hear a clock ticking somewhere behind me, steady, loud in rhythm with my pulse. I tried to play it cool. "So what are they? Like case files?" Her smile widened. "You could call them that." I forced a small laugh, though my throat was tightening. My brain was scrambling for rational explanations. Maybe she collected newspaper articles. Maybe she worked in research. Maybe the initials were a coincidence. But none of those guesses made sense. I glanced again at the shelf. The binders weren't thin. They were stuffed, bulging slightly, edges of papers pressed against the insides. Some even had little tabs sticking out. My eyes drifted back to the one with my initials. The label looked freshly printed. The edges were crisp. I felt the hairs on my arms rise. She must have noticed the way my expression changed, because she tilted her head and asked, "You okay?" Her tone was light, but her eyes weren't. They were watching me too closely, studying every flicker on my face like she was cataloging it. Yeah, I said, trying to sound casual. Just those binders. Kind of intense. They're important to me, she said simply. Every one of them means something. The way she said it sent a shiver down my spine. I set my glass on the table, trying to keep my hand from shaking. The room suddenly felt smaller. My eyes flicked toward the door. I made some excuse about having an early morning, hoping she'd take the hint. She didn't move. She just sat there, legs crossed, tracing the rim of her wine glass with one finger. Finally, I stood up. My heart was thudding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. Thanks for the wine, I said, trying to sound normal. She looked up at me, smiling faintly. You're leaving already? Yeah, I should. Her eyes lingered on me for a second longer than felt comfortable. Then she nodded, her tone almost affectionate. You'll come back, though. There's still so much to add. My hand froze on the doorknob. I didn't look back. I just mumbled something like sure and pulled the door open. The hallway outside felt colder than it should have. I didn't start running until I hit the stairwell. Outside, the air hit me like ice. I looked up at her window, but all the blinds were drawn. No movement, no shadow, just the faint glow of a lamp spilling out into the night. I didn't stop walking until I reached my car. I got in, locked the doors, and sat there for a full minute trying to breathe. My hands were trembling so hard I dropped the keys twice before getting them in the ignition. That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those binders lined up on the shelf, black, uniform, heavy. Each one a name, a person, a story I didn't want to know. And that last one, my initials, blank, waiting. I deleted her number the next morning, but sometimes I still think about her, about that empty binder sitting on her shelf. And the part that really gets me, what I can't stop imagining, is that maybe, even though I left, she didn't. Maybe she's still filling it. He was sweet, quiet, a little awkward in the way that feels endearing rather than uncomfortable. The kind of guy who listens when you talk, really listens, instead of waiting for his turn. We met at a small diner on the edge of town, one of those places with chipped coffee mugs and vinyl booths that stick a little when you slide in. We split a basket of fries, sipped milkshakes, and spent most of the night trading stories about family, school, random pieces of our lives that somehow fit neatly into the flow of conversation. It wasn't fireworks, but it was comfortable. That was the strange part. Dates usually felt like interviews to me, forced smiles, polite laughs, a sense of taking seconds until one of us made an excuse to leave. But this one was calm. He was easy to be around. He didn't check his phone once. He didn't fill the silence with small talk just to avoid a quiet. When the waitress came by, he thanked her like he meant it. There was something old-fashioned about him, something steady. He asked me what my favorite movie was, what music I liked, whether I preferred the beach or the mountains. Ordinary questions, but the way he asked them made me want to answer honestly instead of trying to sound interesting. His voice was soft, almost too quiet for the hum of the diner, but the steadiness in it made me lean forward just to hear him. When we finished eating, he insisted on walking me to my car. He didn't try to hold my hand or go in for a hug, just smiled, said he'd had a good time, and waited for me to get in safely before waving goodbye. It was simple, sweet. All week afterward, I kept replaying it. It felt refreshing compared to the usual disasters. No weird energy, no subtle arrogance, no bad jokes or red flags. Just a simple, ordinary night that left me thinking maybe ordinary was exactly what I'd been missing. Out of curiosity, because that's what people do, I decided to Google him a few days later. Not because I didn't trust him, just curiosity. You go looking for old Facebook pictures, maybe a LinkedIn page, maybe a clue about what someone's like outside of first impression. I typed his full name into the search bar, pressed enter, and expected the usual scroll of social media links. The first result was an obituary. I stared at the screen, certain I misread it. Same name, same town, same face. His photo was right there in the preview box, a color picture of him smiling at the camera, the same smile I'd seen across the booth just a week earlier. The obituary said he died 2 years ago. At first, my brain rejected it outright. It had to be someone else. Maybe a cousin with the same name. Maybe an old photo coincidence. But the details kept lining up. his age, his workplace, even a small note about how much he loved hiking and animals. He told me the same thing, almost word for word. My mouth went dry. I clicked the link. There it was again. His name, his birthday, the date of death, 2 years back. A paragraph about his life. The same hardware store he'd mentioned working at. The same high school. Even a mention of his sister, whose name I remembered him casually referencing when we talked about family. It didn't make sense. I scrolled down to the comments section. Dozens of people had written messages, friends saying they missed him, relatives posting parts and photos from memorials. One comment had a picture of a gravestone. My pulse started hammering. I reread the obituary 3 times, hoping I'd find something, anything that made it untrue. I even opened a new tab to check if maybe there was another person in town with the same name. There wasn't. It was him. I shut my laptop, sat back, and just stared at the wall for a minute. The air in my apartment felt suddenly too still. I tried to think through it logically. Maybe it was identity theft. Maybe someone was catfishing with his name and details. But the man I met wasn't pretending. He hadn't faked the small stuff. He told stories about his job, mentioned a coworker, described helping an older customer carry lumber to her truck. Stories that matched perfectly with what I was reading in that obituary. And he hadn't been evasive or weird about technology either. He just hadn't used it. No phone, no photos, no social media talk. I thought that was refreshing. Now it felt like a clue I'd missed. That night, I couldn't shake it. Every time I replayed the date, the details shifted from comforting to eerie. His stillness, his focus, the way he looked at me, it all felt slightly wrong in hindsight. Too quiet, too careful. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the dark ceiling, hearing his voice in my head, gentle and slow. The next morning, I drove past the diner on my way to work, pretending I just wanted coffee. He wasn't there, of course. I watched the waitress refill someone else's mug and wondered if she remembered him, if she'd seen him before. I almost asked her, but the words felt ridiculous. How do you ask if a ghost was just here last week? Later that evening, curiosity got the better of me again. I opened my laptop and searched his name once more, scrolling deeper this time. Local news archives, community memorial posts, photos of him at birthday parties, hiking trails, family barbecues. All of them dated before the obituary. None after. Nothing newer than 2 years ago. No posts, no tags, no mentions. It was like the world had stopped recording him at that exact point, and then somehow he'd appeared in that diner across from me. My heart started racing again. I slammed the laptop shut. For days I kept expecting a text. Something simple. Had a great time. Let's hang out again. But it never came. My phone stayed silent. The longer the silence stretched, the heavier it felt. I told myself it was fine, that people ghost each other all the time. But that word, ghost, stuck in my head until it didn't sound figurative anymore. Sometimes when I drive past that diner at night, I slow down. The lights inside always look the same, yellow glow, chrome edges, people bent over plates of fries. A few times, I thought I saw someone sitting alone in the booth where we'd been. A familiar shape, a familiar tilt of the head. But every time I blink, the booth is empty again. I've stopped looking him up online. The obituary is still out there, frozen in time, his smiling face waiting for me if I ever type his name again. I can't bring myself to click it anymore. I don't know what I met that night. Maybe it was someone pretending, someone who'd gone too far with a stolen identity. Maybe it was something else entirely. But I keep thinking about the way he looked at me at the end of the date, steady, quiet, almost wistful, like he already knew there wouldn't be another one. And sometimes late at night, I imagine him sitting in that same booth, the hum of the diner around him, watching the door like he's waiting for me to come back. I hope I never see him again. But part of me worries that if I ever do, he'll look exactly the same. Not older, not changed, just like before. And I don't think I'd be able to tell the difference this time. The plan was simple. Coffee, middle of the day. Neutral ground. Nothing high stakes. Nothing that could spiral into something awkward or drawn out if the chemistry wasn't there. Coffee dates are safe. You meet, talk, see if there's a spark, and if not, you can finish your drink and politely leave. I'd done it before. It's the kind of date where you can pretend it's not even a date if things go south. So that was the plan. I showed up 5 minutes early like I always do. The cafe was small but cozy, the kind of place with exposed brick walls, soft music, and chalkboard menus that make every drink sound fancier than it is. I ordered a latte, grabbed a small table near the window, and tried not to look like I was waiting. She came in right on time. She looked good, better than her photos, actually. Her hair was tied back, her jacket casual but neat, the kind of simple confidence that makes a person stand out without trying. She smiled when she saw me, waved, and walked over with this easy stride that instantly made me feel less tense. When she sat down, everything felt normal. Easy even. We talked about where we grew up, our jobs, what we liked doing on weekends. She laughed at one of my stories, this small, genuine laugh that reached her eyes, and I remember thinking maybe this could actually go somewhere. She was funny, quick, and easy to talk to for a combination. Then I noticed them. 3 guys sitting at a table just a few feet away. At first, I didn't pay them any attention. It's a coffee shop. People sit near each other all the time. They weren't talking much, just scrolling their phones and drinking. But after a while, I noticed the way their eyes flicked up every so often. Not random glances. Not idle curiosity. Focused. On me. I brushed it off until she leaned in a little, lowered her voice, and said something that made the air in the room change. She said, "Oh, don't worry about them. They're just my friends." I blinked, confused. "Your friends?" She smiled, nodded toward the 3 men. "Yeah, they're just here to make sure everything's safe." For a second, I thought she meant safe for her. I even opened my mouth to tell her I understood. Online dating can be risky after all. But then she tilted her head, smiled again, and said something I didn't expect. "Safe for you." I laughed, thinking she was joking, but she didn't laugh back. My stomach tightened. The way she said it, so casually like it was nothing, made it worse. Like she was completely comfortable with the idea that 3 men were sitting just a few feet away, keeping an eye on our date, and I was supposed to find that reassuring. I glanced back at them again. They didn't wave, they didn't smile. Just looked at me for a moment before returning to their drinks. Except one of them didn't even bother pretending to check his phone this time. He just watched. The conversation stumbled after that. I tried to steer it back to safe ground, asking about her job, her hobbies, anything, but my mind kept flicking to those 3 pairs of eyes behind me. Every time I shifted, I could feel them watching. Every time she leaned forward, one of them leaned too, just slightly. I told myself not to be paranoid. Maybe they really were just protective friends. Maybe they were worried about her safety. But if that was true, why did she say they were there for me? I wanted to leave, but walking out felt impossible without making it weirder. So I stayed, pretending to enjoy the coffee that had gone cold. When she excused herself to go to the bathroom, the room got heavier. The second she disappeared down the hallway, one of the men leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, and just stared at me. No pretense this time. His gaze was direct, unreadable. The other 2 murmured something to each other under their breath, but I couldn't catch it. I looked down at my phone, scrolling for no reason, pretending to type. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. When she came back, the shift was instant. The men straightened up, returning to their drinks. She sat down, smiling like nothing was wrong. She even joked that the bathroom line was long, completely unaware, or maybe unconcerned, about the suffocating tension sitting between us. I nodded along, forcing small talk, but my words were clumsy. I couldn't focus. I kept expecting one of the men to get up, to come over, to say something. None of them did. They just sat there, watching. After a few more minutes, I couldn't take it anymore. I told her I had to go, some excuse about work, something vague. She didn't seem surprised. She smiled, thanked me for the coffee, said she had a nice time. It all sounded normal again. Too normal. I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and made for the door as calmly as I could. I didn't look back until I was outside, the bell above the cafe door still jingling behind me. And that's when I heard it, the scrape of chairs, the soft thud of footsteps. I turned and saw them. The 3 men were following me out. Not close enough to call it aggressive, but not far enough to pretend it was coincidence. They spread out slightly as they walked, fanning across the parking lot like they were closing in without actually closing in. My pulse spiked. I tried to tell myself they were just leading 2, but my body didn't believe it. My legs moved faster, hands fumbling for my keys. I could hear their footsteps matching mine. Steady, quiet, deliberate. The lot was mostly empty. My car sat near the back, under a flickering light. Each step felt longer than the last. I reached the car, unlocked it, and slid inside in one motion, slamming the door and hitting the lock button before they got closer. The sound of the locks clicking echoed in the silence like gunfire. They didn't approach. They just stopped, a few spaces away, and stood there, watching. One had his hands in his pockets. Another adjusted his jacket. None of them said a word, just watched as I started the engine. I backed out fast, not daring to make eye contact. When I turned onto the street, I risked one quick glance in the rearview mirror. They were still there, lined up under the streetlight, faces half in shadow, eyes fixed on my car as I drove away. By the time I got home, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the key. I sat there in the dark for a long time, engine off, listening to my own breathing. I kept replaying the date in my head, trying to find the moment it went wrong. The way she smiled. The way she said they were there to keep things safe. The way they followed me out, silent and synchronized like they rehearsed it. I thought about texting her to ask what that was all about, but I didn't. I deleted her number instead. I don't know what that was. Some elaborate prank. A test. A trap. But I know how it felt. Like being studied. And the worst part. When I finally worked up the nerve to drive by that cafe a week later, they were there again. Same table. Same 3 men. And when one of them looked up and saw me through the window, he smiled. Just once. Like he'd been waiting. I don't even know why I said yes. 2 weeks of talking, a handful of late-night calls, and then, out of nowhere, he suggested a weekend getaway. At first, I laughed it off, thinking he was joking. Who plans a trip that fast? But he kept bringing it up, painting his picture of a cozy Airbnb outside the city, quiet, peaceful, surrounded by woods. Perfect spot to disconnect, he said. He made it sound harmless, romantic even, like one of those curated weekend vlogs where couples cook together and take Polaroids by a fire. I said yes before I really thought about it. We drove up on a Friday afternoon. The first hour felt fine. Music low, windows cracked, wind brushing through my hair. He talked easily, mostly about random things. Movies, his job, the kind of stuff that doesn't mean much but fills the silence. He was polite, maybe a little intense, but not in a bad way. Then the road started getting emptier. At first, it was just fewer cars, then fewer houses, then no houses at all, just miles of trees and long stretches of cracked asphalt. The radio crackled into static. My phone, which had been half-readily scrolling, dropped from 3 bars to 1, then to nothing. I asked how far we were. He smiled without looking over and said, "Almost there." Something about the way he said it made my stomach knot. I told myself not to overthink it. But my chest felt tight, and I couldn't shake the sense that we were leaving the world behind 1 mile at a time. When we finally pulled up, my heart sank. The Airbnb wasn't the cozy cabin I'd imagined. It was an old farmhouse with peeling paint and a sagging porch, sitting in the middle of nowhere. No lights, no other houses, not even the faint hum of a distant road. The gravel crunched loud under the tires, echoing into the woods around us like we'd woken something up. I got out, stretching stiffly, forcing a smile. The air smelled like damp earth and old wood. The curtains were drawn tight, the windows cloudy with dust. Somewhere, a tree branch scraped against the roof with a slow, dragging sound. No service, still nothing. Inside, it was worse. The house smelled faintly of mildew, and the furniture looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. A sagging couch, mismatched chairs, a fireplace layered in soot. The floors creaked under every step. He set our bags down and smiled like he couldn't see any of it, like this was exactly what he'd imagined. "Peaceful, right?" he said. I forced a laugh, nodding, my throat dry. We unpacked. He pulled the key out of his pocket and set it on the table beside his bag. I noticed he hadn't mentioned getting me a copy. Didn't think much of it at the time, but later, lying awake, that detail felt like a chain. The booking, the keys, the car, the location, everything was his. That night, he cooked pasta with groceries he brought himself. He poured wine, smiled across the table, and told stories that didn't quite sound real. I smiled when I was supposed to, laughed where I should, but the silence in between was suffocating. Every creak of the house made me jump. At one point, I excused myself to the bathroom. The hallway light flickered as I walked past the front door. The key sat on the table next to his half-empty glass of wine, glinting under the bulb. My hands itched to grab it, to just take it, step outside, run. But the thought of wandering down that pitch-black road, no phone signal, no idea where I was, it froze me in place. I went back to the table, pretending nothing was wrong. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The sheet smelled faintly of dust. I could hear the wind outside, low and steady, pressing against the windows. Every few minutes, the floorboards creaked somewhere beyond the door. I told myself it was the house settling. But then I realized the sounds were rhythmic, measured, footsteps. He didn't come in, but I knew he wasn't sleeping. The next morning, he acted like nothing was strange. He made coffee, hummed under his breath, and suggested a hike. I said I wasn't feeling great, made up some excuse about headache. He shrugged, said he'd go alone for a bit, and told me to relax. I stood at the window after he left, watching him walk down the overgrown path until the trees swallowed him. My pulse raced so hard I could hear it. That was my chance. I grabbed my phone. No signal. I searched the kitchen for anything useful. A landline, a router, a note with a number. Nothing. Just dusty dishes, mismatched utensils, and a drawer full of old paper maps. The edges were yellowed and torn, the kind that looked like props in a horror movie. I stared at the front door again. The key was gone. When he came back an hour later, he was smiling again, relaxed, as if the world hadn't tilted. He cooked eggs, asked how I was feeling. I mumbled something, avoiding eye contact. Every move he made was deliberate. The way he locked the door again. The way he looked at me just a little too long when I didn't answer. By the second night, I was barely holding it together. I lay under the blanket, eyes wide, every nerve in my body screaming to stay awake. At one point, I heard the floorboards creak again, slowly, closer this time. Then silence. The kind of silence that feels alive. When I finally drifted off, it was from exhaustion, not calm. Sunday morning came with gray light leaking through the curtains. He was already up, packing his bag. He smiled when he saw me, cheerful as ever, saying we should head out before the weather got bad. I didn't care about the weather. I just wanted to see civilization again. As soon as the car turned onto the main road, I felt something inside me unclench. My phone flickered awake, signal bars blinking back to life. Notifications exploded across the screen. Texts, emails, messages. I hadn't realized how quiet the past 2 days had been until my phone lit up again. He glanced over, still smiling. Had fun? I forced a nod. My throat felt tight. Yeah, I lied. It was nice. He grinned, eyes back on the road. We should do it again sometime. I smiled too, small and polite, and said nothing. Half an hour later, city signs appeared. Traffic, gas stations, people. The sound of life returned, and only then did I feel like I could breathe again. He dropped me off in front of my building, leaned across the console, and said, "Text me when you're settled." I nodded, grabbed my bag, and stepped out. I didn't look back. When I got inside, I locked the door behind me, sat on the floor, and just stared at my phone. I didn't text him. Didn't block him either. I just left the screen dark, as if ignoring it could erase the last 48 hours. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't gone. I don't know what would happen if I tried to leave. I only know one thing. When I checked my phone later, scrolling through old messages, I realized something I hadn't noticed before. He'd never told me the name of the town. Not once. She told me early on that she was clairvoyant. Not like a joke. About like when someone says they have a sixth sense, because they get bad vibes sometimes. She said it plainly, like it was one of her defining traits, something as natural as saying she was left-handed. I didn't take it seriously. We met online, talked for a week or two. Her messages were sharp, clever without being showy, mysterious without trying too hard. She didn't flirt much, but there was something magnetic about the way she typed. When I asked what she did for work, she just said, "People tell me things." I'd assumed that meant therapy or something in that world. It wasn't until she mentioned seeing things before they happened that I realized she wasn't joking. Still, I brushed it off. People say weird things online all the time. She picked the restaurant, a small place tucked between an antique shop and a closed record store, the kind of spot you only know about from someone who's been there before. When I walked in, the lights were low, the walls lined with mirrors and dark wood. Candles flickered in tiny glass cups, and jazz hummed quietly from a speaker somewhere near the bar. She was already sitting at the table. Her posture was perfect, straight-backed, hands folded, eyes steady. She smiled when she saw me, but it wasn't the wide, easy kind of smile that put you at ease. It was polite, controlled. We ordered drinks, talked about work, life, small things. She listened carefully, her eyes locked on mine the whole time. When I paused, she didn't fill the space with nervous chatter. She just studied me. It was unsettling, but also a little intoxicating. Then she started saying things she shouldn't know. "You keep your shoes by the door," she said casually. "You hate waking up to a messy room." I blinked. Yeah, I guess." She smiled, faintly. "Your mom's hair is light brown, right? Wavy?" That stopped me. I hadn't mentioned my mom. Not once. I laughed it off, trying to sound casual. "Lucky guess." She tilted her head. "I don't guess." Her tone was calm, flat, not defensive, just certain. The next few minutes were a blur of me pretending everything was normal while my skin crawled. I told myself she was observant. Maybe she stalked my social media. Maybe she saw a family photo somewhere. That had to be it. Halfway through the meal, she leaned in, elbows on the table. The candlelight caught the bottom of her face, making her eyes look darker, deeper. Then she said, soft enough that I almost didn't hear it, "You shouldn't have come tonight." I froze. My hand stopped halfway to my glass. She didn't laugh or backtrack or try to explain. She just leaned back, smoothed the napkin on her lap, and took another sip of wine. For a moment, the whole restaurant disappeared. I could still hear the low chatter of people, the clinking of forks, the faint hum of music, but it all felt distant, like I was watching from underwater. "What do you mean?" I asked finally. She shrugged lightly. "I just saw something." Her voice was calm, too calm. I wanted to leave right then, but my body wouldn't move. Some part of me thought maybe it was an act, some weird power play. I told myself she wanted to seem mysterious, wanted to keep me off balance. But the way she looked at me, it wasn't playful. It was almost pitying. She went back to eating, asking ordinary questions like nothing had happened. Where I grew up, whether I liked dogs or cats. But every few minutes, she'd drop another detail she couldn't possibly know. "You don't sleep much," she said at one point. "You wake up between 3 and 4 a lot." I felt my heartbeat pick up. "Okay, that's how would you." "You dream about driving," she interrupted. "Always the same road, always dark." My stomach turned. I hadn't told anyone that, not even friends. The waiter came by with the check, and I nearly jumped at the chance to focus on something else. I handed over my card, trying to act casual, but my hand was shaking. While he walked away, she leaned forward again, resting her chin in her palm. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Don't drive home the way you came," she said. "It won't end well." This time, I didn't even try to laugh. I just stared at her, my mind scrambling for logic. Maybe she was threatening me. Maybe it was some twisted joke. She didn't blink, didn't move, just waited for me to respond. I nodded slowly. "Okay," I said, forcing my voice not to shake. "I'll take a different route." Her lips curved into that same faint, unreadable smile. Good. The waiter came back, and I signed the receipt without looking at the total. She didn't say anything else while I stood to leave. No hug, no handshake, just a quiet smile that followed me all the way out the door. Outside, the air hit me like cold water. I stood on the sidewalk for a second, trying to steady myself. The restaurant's warm light spilled onto the pavement behind me, and for a second I thought I saw her silhouette in the window watching. I walked faster toward my car. The street was empty except for the glow of the streetlights. My keys felt slippery in my hand. I kept expecting to hear footsteps behind me, but there was nothing. Once I got inside, I locked the doors immediately. My phone screen glowed in my lap, GPS open. I hovered over the home button. Then her voice echoed in my head, "Don't drive home the way you came." I told myself it was nonsense, but I still couldn't press start. My chest felt tight, breath shallow. Finally, I opened the map manually and picked a different route, longer, winding through neighborhoods I didn't recognize, just to quiet the panic crawling up my throat. The drive was silent. No music, no radio. Just the hum of the engine and the faint tremor in my hands. Every stoplight felt like it lasted forever. Every shadow at the edge of the road looked like someone waiting. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My house looked normal, peaceful even. Lights off, mailbox crooked, the faint glow from my neighbor's porch. Then my phone buzzed. I jumped. The screen lit up. One new message. Unknown number, but I knew who it was. "See? I told you you'd make it home safe." My mouth went dry. I hadn't texted her. I hadn't told her I left. I hadn't told her where I lived. I stared at the message until the light from my phone started to dim. Then I turned it off and tossed it onto the passenger seat like it was something alive. I didn't move for a long time. Just sat there, heart pounding, eyes fixed on the dark window of my own house. When I finally went inside, I locked the door, slid the chain across, and checked it twice. I didn't turn my phone back on until morning. And that was the last time I ever went on a date with someone who claimed they could see things. From the start, it wasn't terrible. Not amazing, but not terrible either. We'd been talking for a couple of weeks. He seemed normal enough, funny in messages, polite when we met, not pushy, not awkward. Just average in the best possible way. After the parade of disastrous dates before him, average felt like a relief. He suggested this little Italian place downtown. Said it had the best carbonara in the city. I looked it up, warm lighting, decent reviews, nothing fancy but nice enough that it felt like a real date. So I said yes. When I got there, the air outside smelled like rain and garlic. Inside, it was dimly lit, the kind of cozy that feels like everyone's whispering secrets. Red candles flickered on every table, soft music murmured from hidden speakers, and the hum of quiet conversation filled the space. He was already seated when I walked in, waved me over with a smile that looked easy, practiced. His hair was a little messy in that deliberate way, his sleeves rolled up just enough to look casual but intentional. He stood to hug me lightly before I sat down. I remember thinking, okay, maybe this won't be a disaster. We ordered wine, shared bruschetta, and made small talk. He told stories about his dog, some golden retriever named Max, and his job at a marketing startup, whatever that meant. He talked about growing up in another state, about missing real winters, about the best pizza in his hometown. He laughed easily like he told these stories before. And maybe that should have been the first sign. Halfway through dinner, he patted his pocket suddenly, frowning. "Ah, crap," he said, laughing it off. "I think I left my wallet in the car." I smiled, said, "No worries," and twirled a forkful of pasta. He told me to grab it quick, stood up, brushed off his jacket, and headed toward the door. The moment felt small, forgettable. I watched him go, expecting him back in a minute or two. The pasta was still steaming. My drink was half full. I scrolled through my phone, checked messages, glanced at the door every so often. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The pasta cooled, the candle burned lower, and I started to feel that tiny pinch of self-consciousness that comes from being alone in a place built for pairs. I told myself maybe he'd gotten caught in conversation outside. Maybe he was taking a call. Maybe he was just slow. 15 minutes. I texted him a quick everything okay, but the message stayed unread. I checked the door again. Nothing. 20 minutes. I tried to focus on the background chatter, the clink of dishes, a burst of laughter from another table, but every sound just reminded me that I was sitting there alone, pretending not to be. By the time 30 minutes had passed, the waiter came over, that polite, hesitant expression plastered on his face, the one people wear when they know something you don't. "Everything okay?" he asked. I managed a tight smile. "Yeah, just waiting for him to come back. He forgot his wallet in the car." He hesitated for half a second, eyes flicking toward the door. Then he nodded, murmured something, and walked away. When he returned a few minutes later, he wasn't carrying food or the check. He was holding a folded napkin. He placed it next to my plate like it was nothing, like he was just clearing the table, and walked off without another word. Confused, I unfolded it under the table. The handwriting was quick, messy, all in pencil. He does this every Friday. My hands went cold. I read it again and again. The words didn't change. He does this every Friday. For a moment, I couldn't even process it. What did that mean? He does what every Friday? Then the pieces slid together in the worst possible way. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't me getting ghosted after a mediocre date. This was something he did. Regularly. Deliberately. I looked up, my eyes scanning the restaurant. The waiter was back behind the counter, pretending not to look at me. When our eyes met, he gave the faintest nod, sympathy flickering across his face like he'd done this before. The realization settled heavy in my stomach. How many women had sat in this same seat, with the same candle flickering between half-finished plates, waiting for him to come back? How many had laughed off his stories about his dog, listened to his marketing job spiel, shared appetizers, split pasta, just like me, before watching him walk out the door? I imagined him pulling out of the parking lot, humming along to the same song on the radio, satisfied. A routine. A ritual. The worst part was how normal it had all felt. How calculated it must have been to pull that off without a hitch, week after week. I folded the note back up carefully, slid it into my bag, and waved for the check. When it came, I paid for both meals. Not because I wanted to, but because leaving without doing it would have made me feel worse, like I was letting him win again. The waiter mumbled a quiet thank you, eyes soft, like he knew none of this was really about dinner anymore. Outside, the air had cooled. The streets were nearly empty. My footsteps echoed too loud as I walked to my car. I scanned a lot out of habit, but his car was already gone. On the drive home, the headlights stretched out ahead of me in long, ghostly lines. I tried to shake off the feeling, but my hands wouldn't stop gripping the wheel. Every song that came on the radio felt wrong. Every red light felt too long. At home, I sat in the dark for a while before opening my phone. His chat was still there. Our little thread of jokes, movie recommendations, small talk. His profile picture, that same easy smile. I typed out a message before I could stop myself. Why'd you leave? The message never delivered. He'd already blocked me. Something about that hit harder than it should have. Not the rejection itself, but the speed. The fact that he'd done this enough times to know the steps by heart. Leave, block, move on. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred. Then I pulled the napkin from my bag, smoothed it flat on the counter, and read it one more time. He does this every Friday. The words looked even colder now. Not a warning. Not an apology. Just a statement. I thought about calling the restaurant, asking if they'd ever reported him. What would I say? What could they do? The note had sounded tired, like they'd given up trying. Like this was just another part of their week. Serve the pasta, light the candles, wait for him to vanish, and hand the next girl the same folded message. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every second. His smile. His stories. The way he'd leaned in and laughed at just the right times. All of it a script. I pictured all the other women who'd sat in my place. Different faces, same seat, same soft music, same flickering candle. Some probably laughed it off. Some probably cried. Maybe some never even got the note. But I did. And that was the worst part. Because once you know someone's done it before, you can't unsee the pattern. You stop feeling like a person who got unlucky. You start feeling like the latest chapter in someone else's story. The night itself wasn't bad. Dinner was fine. Conversation was fine. Nothing dramatic, nothing strange enough to be a red flag. She was charming in this offbeat kind of way. Lots of talk about crystals, energy, and moon cycles. I didn't take it seriously, but I nodded along, smiled, pretended to listen. Everyone has their quirks. She was funny, actually. Quick-witted, bright-eyed, a little intense. When she laughed, she threw her head back, all teeth and confidence. I found it weirdly magnetic. So when the check came and she leaned in with that same smile, asking if I wanted to come up for a quick drink, I hesitated, but not for long. She must have seen the hesitation because she laughed softly and said, "Just one. I promise." She said it like she already knew I'd say yes. And against my better judgment, I did. Her building was one of those old downtown ones that still smelled faintly of dust and radiator heat. The fluorescent lights in the hallway flickered and buzzed as we climbed the stairs. She walked ahead of me, heels clicking on the tile, coat swaying slightly. Third floor. Apartment 3B. The door was painted a pale blue, chipped around the handle. She pulled out a small silver key, unlocked it, and pushed it open with a creak. "Come in," she said. The second I stepped inside, the door swung shut behind me with a heavy metallic clunk, louder than any lock I'd ever heard. Instinctively, I turned and reached for the handle. It didn't budge. She smiled. "It locks automatically," she said. "Energy protection." Her tone was matter-of-fact, like that was the most natural thing in the world. I laughed a little because what else do you do? But she didn't laugh with me. She just kept smiling, steady, calm, like she was waiting to see how I'd react. Her apartment was dim, lit by a few yellow lamps that threw soft, uneven light. The walls were covered in hanging things, dream catchers, feathers, long strings of beads, bits of glass that caught the light and fractured it into sharp, scattered colors. Shelves lined the walls, cluttered with jars of herbs and candles in every shape and size. Books everywhere, stacks on the floor, the coffee table, the windowsill. The air smelled thick, like incense and something metallic underneath. She handed me a glass of red wine and gestured for me to sit. I took a small sip just to be polite. She didn't drink right away. She sat cross-legged on the couch, her hands folded in her lap, and watched me. Really watched me. Her eyes didn't move, didn't blink much. It felt like she was taking inventory of me, my posture, my breathing, my thoughts, everything. I tried to keep the conversation normal. Asked about her job, her hobbies, where she grew up. She answered in vague phrases like everything she said had a second meaning. Then she tilted her head and said quietly, "You have restless energy." I blinked. "What?" "Your aura," she said like it was obvious. "It's unsettled. You're carrying something heavy with you." I laughed awkwardly. Long week, I guess. She didn't laugh back, just nodded slowly like she'd already knew. The silence that followed stretched too long. The only sound was the faint hum of a fridge somewhere in the background and the quiet buzz of the light by the door. I set my wine down and said I was going to use the bathroom. She smiled, too quickly, and nodded. "Down the hall," she said. The hallway was narrow, lined with mirrors. Dozens of them. Some cracked, some smudged, some so old the glass had gone cloudy. Every few steps I caught flashes of myself from different angles, distorted reflections staring back. I kept my eyes down until I reached the bathroom. Even in there, it felt off. Crystals lined the sink, each sitting in a little dish of salt. A bowl of water on the counter reflected the ceiling light in a perfect still circle. I splashed my face, gripped the edge of the sink, and told myself to relax. When I opened the door again, she was standing at the end of the hall. Silent, still, smiling, like she'd been waiting the whole time. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said too quickly. Back in the living room, she was already sitting again. This time, a deck of tarot cards was spread across the table. She shuffled them slowly, deliberately, eyes flicking up at me every few seconds. "I thought we could do a reading," she said. Before I could respond, she began flipping cards one by one. Her voice dropped to a near whisper as she spoke. "Death," she murmured. "Not always literal, but it means something's ending." Another card. The moon. Secrets. Confusion. Shadows. Her eyes flicked up at me, locking onto mine. My heart thudded harder than it should have. Another card. The tower. She smiled faintly. That once. Significant. I tried to keep my voice calm. "Okay, that's fun, but I really should get going. Early morning tomorrow." Her expression didn't change. "Time works differently here," she said softly. "You shouldn't rush it." Something about the way she said it made the hairs on my arms stand up. I reached for my jacket. Seriously, I should go. She didn't move. The door loomed behind me, silent and heavy. I reached for the handle. It didn't turn. I jiggled it harder. Nothing. Solid. My throat went dry. "Hey, the lock stuck." She stayed seated watching me. "It's not stuck." My pulse hammered in my ears. "Then could you?" She stood slowly, set down her glass, and walked over. Her movements were measured, graceful. She pressed her palm flat against the door, closed her eyes, and whispered something under her breath. There was a faint click. She stepped back. You can lead if you want, she said, voice soft. I didn't hesitate. I opened the door, stepped into the hallway, and kept walking. Her voice followed me, calm, almost gentle. Take care of that energy, okay? I didn't look back. I took the stairs two at a time, the sound of my footsteps echoing off the tile. By the time I hit the street, the cold night air felt like a shock to my lungs. Only then did I realize I was shaking. I walked half a block before I stopped, turned, and glanced up. Her window was dark. No movement, no shadow, just a faint orange glow from somewhere deep inside. At home, I sat in my car for a long time, staring at my hands on the steering wheel. They were trembling. The sound of that lock, the deep mechanical clunk, played over and over in my head. It wasn't just a lock. It felt like something closing behind me. Something I was lucky to get out of. That was the last time I ever went upstairs for just a quick drink. The thing about him was that he seemed almost too good to be true. Not in the over-the-top movie kind of way, just enough to make me feel like I had finally found someone normal. He was charming in messages, funny without being annoying, the kind of guy who actually asked questions and listened to the answers. He remembered the little things too. My favorite tea, the way I always walked home from work, the song I said I used to fall asleep to. He sent me playlists filled with soft acoustic tracks and said they reminded him of me. It was comfortable. Easy. 2 weeks of talking late-night messages, half-serious flirting, and I started to think maybe, just maybe, this one was different. We decided to meet on a Saturday afternoon. A small cafe in the middle of town. Neutral ground, people around, broad daylight. It felt safe. I got there 10 minutes early, ordered a drink to keep my hands busy, and picked a corner table near the window. My heart was racing, but the good kind. I kept checking the door, half expecting to see him the way he looked in his photos. Warm smile, dark hair, that slightly messy look that felt effortless. Then I saw him. He stood by the entrance, scanning the room until his eyes landed on me. Same build, same jawline, same dimple when he smiled. I waved, and he smiled back, walking over quickly. But as he got closer, something tugged at the back of my mind. His hair was shorter than in his profile pictures. His eyes, same color, but not quite the same expression. I brushed it off. People look different in person all the time. Cameras lie, lighting lies, memories lie. Hey, he said, voice warm, easy. Hey, I echoed, smiling back. We sat, ordered drinks. At first, everything seemed fine. He was polite, friendly, maybe a little more serious than I expected. The playful tone he'd had in messages wasn't there, but I figured nerves could do that. I was nervous too. The conversation flowed, but something about the rhythm was off. The little jokes that had made me laugh in chat, he didn't use them. His phrasing was different. His stories didn't quite line up. When I asked about the dog he'd told me about, he looked confused for half a second, then quickly smiled and changed the subject. Halfway through the date, he leaned forward, lowered his voice, and said something that made my stomach drop. I should tell you something, he said, smiling faintly. I'm not the one you've been talking to. For a second, I just stared at him. I thought maybe it was a bad joke. What? He tilted his head slightly, like he was studying how to react. I'm his brother, his twin. I laughed once, uncertain. Okay, sure. He didn't laugh back. I'm serious, he said. He's not really into dating right now, but I am. I saw your messages, and I thought, why waste the connection? You seem nice. I blinked. My mind tried to catch up, tried to make sense of what he was saying. You read our messages. He nodded. Calm. Yeah, we share a place. I saw the chats, saw how you two talked. I think we actually get along better. There was no guilt in his tone, no embarrassment, just this eerie confidence, like what he'd done was completely normal. I could feel my pulse in my neck. The cafe around us blurred, the chatter fading under a thick wave of nausea. He kept talking about how his brother wasn't serious, how he didn't believe in modern dating, how he was the more responsible one. I barely heard the words. My thoughts were spinning too fast. All those late-night conversations, the dumb inside jokes, the things I'd shared thinking I was getting closer to someone, they hadn't been with him. They'd been stolen. He wasn't just pretending. He'd been studying me, learning what I responded to, what I liked, what I trusted. I must have gone quiet because he leaned forward again, lowering his voice. Hey, don't look so freaked out. I'm not a bad guy. I just wanted to meet you. You'll see, I'm better for you than he ever could be. That line hit me like a physical shove. Better for me. Like I was a thing he'd swapped out with his brother. I looked down at my coffee cup, realized I hadn't touched it. My fingers felt numb. I should go, I said. He smiled. Already? You haven't even finished your drink. I'm not feeling well. He didn't move to stop me, but his eyes followed every motion, my hand reaching for my bag, my body pushing the chair back, my steps toward the door. I could feel his gaze between my shoulder blades as I walked away. Outside, the sunlight was too bright. The air felt too cold. I walked fast, not running but close. My heart wouldn't slow down. Every reflection in the cafe window, every car door slamming nearby made me flinch. I glanced behind me once. He wasn't there. Still, the sense of being watched stuck to me like static. When I got home, I went straight to my phone. The chat was still there, our messages, his jokes, his voice messages. I typed a question, fingers trembling. "You stand me up?" No response. A few minutes later, his profile icon disappeared. Then the entire account. Gone. I just sat there staring at the empty chat window. That's what kept me up that night. Not anger. Fear. Because if he could fake a connection that easily, if he could become someone else so convincingly, how many times had he done it before? How many other people had thought they were getting to know one brother, only to sit across from the other, smiling that same practiced smile? For weeks after, I caught myself looking over my shoulder in public places. Every time I heard laughter that sounded familiar, I'd glance up, half expecting to see that same face. I never did. I deleted the app, locked both profiles, and stopped dating for a while. But sometimes late at night, when my phone buzzes with an unknown number or a new match request, I hesitate. Because there's always that small crawling thought in the back of my head. What if it's him again? It started out way better than I expected. Most first dates are awkward from the jump. The nervous smiles, the too long pauses, the clumsy jokes that don't quite land. But this one actually felt natural. Easy, even. We met at a small Mexican restaurant tucked between a thrift store and a nail salon. It wasn't fancy, but it smelled amazing. Warm tortillas, grilled onions, that hint of lime in the air. She showed up right on time. That alone impressed me. She was even prettier than her pictures. Dark hair, a little messy in a way that looked effortless, and this big, easy smile that reached her eyes. She waved when she saw me, walked right up, confident but relaxed. From the moment she sat down, I felt that rare kind of relief, like maybe I wouldn't have to fake my way through 2 hours of small talk this time. We clicked fast. Conversation flowed without those awkward silences that usually stretch too long. We laughed about dumb stuff on the menu, traded bad date stories, compared playlists. She was sharp and funny, the kind of funny that doesn't need to try too hard. When she talked, she looked right at me, not glancing at her phone every 2 minutes. Honestly, it was going better than most dates I'd had in years. I could feel my shoulders relax. For the first hour, everything just worked. Then the drinks came, then the food. Then, out of nowhere, the energy shifted. She reached into her purse. I figured she was checking a text, maybe grabbing a compact. No big deal. But then she unlocked her phone, opened FaceTime, and suddenly I was staring at a little boy on the screen. He couldn't have been more than 3. Sitting cross-legged on a couch somewhere, clutching a red toy truck. He had big brown eyes, the same color as hers, and when he saw her face pop up, he lit up. "Hi, baby," she cooed. I froze with my fork halfway to my mouth. My brain scrambled for context. Maybe her babysitter was calling, maybe something was wrong. But she just smiled, waved at the screen, and said, "Guess what, sweetheart? Mommy's on a date." My smile faltered. Then she turned the phone toward me. "This is your new dad," she said brightly. My heart dropped so fast it made me dizzy. The kid blinked at me, wide-eyed and confused. He didn't say anything, just stared through the phone, his tiny fingers gripping the toy tighter. I forced a weak smile and gave a half-hearted wave, the kind you give when you're not sure what else to do. Hey, buddy." She beamed like this was completely normal, like we weren't meeting for the first time. like she hadn't just casually announced me as a father to her toddler. My pulse pounded in my ears. I glanced around the restaurant, hoping maybe someone would interrupt, maybe a waiter would come by, break the moment. But no one did. She carried on as if nothing strange had happened. She asked him if he'd eaten, told him what she was having, enchiladas, gavak, a margarita. She laughed when he showed her a drawing he'd made. She kept turning the phone back toward me, keeping my face in frame. See, sweetheart, he's cute, right? He's gonna take good care of us. Us. I wanted to melt through the floor. I tried to look anywhere but the screen, the salsa, the candles, the table behind her. My chest felt tight, my throat dry. She talked to him for nearly 10 minutes. 10 long, unbearable minutes where I sat there, pretending to smile while my mind screamed to leave. Every so often, she'd glance at me like she was waiting to see how I'd react, daring me to flinch, to pull away, to ruin her perfect little fantasy. When she finally hung up, she sighed contentedly, like a mom after bedtime. She slipped her phone back into her bag, looked at me, and said, "That went well." I couldn't even speak. She reached across the table, lightly touched my wrist. "I can tell you're good with kids. He's going to love you." I gave a strangled laugh. We've known each other 2 weeks. She tilted her head, smile never faltering. "Sometimes you just know." After that, the night dragged. The food sat cold between us, untouched. I kept checking the time, desperate for an exit. But she kept talking, about parenting, about stability, of finding someone serious. She said she didn't want to waste time anymore. She said she needed a real partner. Every sentence felt heavier than the last. She spoke about schools, routines, future trips. She used we instead of I. Every so often, she'd slip in a little detail that made my stomach clench. How she'd always imagined a family of 3. How she told her son she found someone special. I just nodded, pretending to listen. My stomach churned. When the check came, I didn't even glance at the total. I paid just to end it faster. She thanked me sweetly, her hand brushing mine like it was already a habit. Outside, I offered to walk her to her car, mostly because I didn't want her following me. The parking lot was quiet, the air cold. She hugged me tightly before I could react, her arms firm, her breath warm against my neck. "He's going to be so happy," she whispered. I froze. When she finally pulled away, she smiled like we just shared something intimate, something real. "Text me when you get home, okay? I'll tell him goodnight from you." I mumbled something, nodded, got into my car as fast as I could. Before I'd even left the parking lot, my phone buzzed. A notification from her. It was a photo. A screenshot from the FaceTime call. Her son on one side, me on the other, caught mid-blink, awkward and confused. She captioned it, "My boys." My stomach flipped. I deleted the message immediately, blocked her number, sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my hands ached. The drive home felt endless. Every red light, every glance at my phone made my pulse spike. I half expected her to somehow be behind me, following, calling from another number. For days after, I couldn't shake it. That kid's face, small, trusting, staring at me through a phone while his mom told him I was his new dad. The way she'd said it, not joking, not testing me, just deciding, like she'd already built a whole future in her head and slotted me neatly inside it. I tried to laugh about it later when friends asked how the date went. Crazy, I'd say. Funny story. But the truth didn't feel funny. It felt invasive, wrong. Because somewhere out there, that photo probably still exists. Me sitting there at that restaurant, unknowingly starring in someone else's fantasy. And sometimes when my phone buzzes late at night with a message from an unknown number, I hesitate before opening it. Part of me is still waiting to see that same picture again. Captioned, maybe with just 2 words. "We're waiting." He'd been pushing the idea of cooking for me since our very first few conversations. Said restaurants were too impersonal, that candlelight and chatter were just distractions. A real connection, he said, happened when people shared a meal at home, when they cooked and ate in the same space. At first, I laughed it off. Nobody suggests that for a first date anymore. It's too intimate too soon. But he kept bringing it up every time we talked, like it was some romantic ideal he needed to fulfill. When I hesitated, he got gentle about it, almost persuasive in this quiet, guilt-laced way. He said things like, Don't you want something genuine? And you'll see, I'm a really good cook. Eventually, I gave in. He texted me the address the morning of, told me not to bring anything, not even wine, said he already had the perfect bottle waiting. When I pulled up that night, the neighborhood looked normal enough, quiet, suburban, the kind of street where the only sounds are sprinklers and the occasional barking dog. But his house was darker than the rest. One porch light glowed weakly, yellowed and flickering. Every other window was black. The moment I stepped out of my car, the door opened. He didn't peek through the blinds or wait for me to knock. He just opened it, smiling, like he'd been standing there waiting. Right on time, he said, voice smooth and low. I smiled back, trying not to look nervous. He stepped aside, motioning me in with an open hand. And the second I crossed the threshold, I stopped cold. The walls. Every single one was covered in mirrors. Not picture frames, not decorative panels, mirrors. From floor to ceiling, edge to edge, joined so tightly you couldn't see where one ended and the next began. The hallway stretched out in an endless chain of reflections. Me again, repeating into infinity. He closed the door softly behind me, and the click of the latch sounded louder than it should have. Wow, I managed. You really like mirrors. He grinned, stepping beside me so that his reflection multiplied too, surrounding us both. They help the light flow, he said. They keep the energy open, and they multiply beauty. I laughed weakly, not sure how to respond to that. My reflection laughed too, 100 times over. He led me further inside, down a narrow hallway that opened into a living room. Same thing, mirrors on every wall. Some had faint distortions at the edges, warping the reflections slightly. My arms looked longer, my face thinner. The effect made me dizzy. I caught myself hesitating in the doorway. He turned, noticing. Don't worry, he said. It takes a minute to get used to. The kitchen was visible from where I stood. Sleek, spotless, too spotless. Every surface gleamed, reflecting light from the candles he lit. The air smelled faintly of garlic, wine, and something sweet underneath, sugar maybe, or vanilla. Then I saw the table. It was perfectly set, line and napkin folded into a crisp triangle, one glass of red wine already poured, candles burning low. But there was only one place setting. One plate, one chair, one set of utensils. For me. The other side of the table was bare. No chair, no plate, no glass. My throat went dry. You're not eating? I asked, trying to sound casual. He shook his head slowly, still smiling that unreadable smile. Tonight's about you, he said. I want to watch you enjoy it. I forced a chuckle. You mean with me, right? His eyes didn't waver. Of course, he said, but didn't move to add another plate. I looked back toward the table. The food was already plated. Pasta, steam curling up from a pale, glossy sauce. The silverware gleamed. My own reflection surrounded me from every direction, dozens of versions of myself sitting in that chair, waiting. He pulled the chair out with exaggerated politeness. Please, he said. My legs felt unsteady, but I sat. The candlelight flickered against the mirrors, scattering the glow 1,000 times over. The air felt too still, like the house was holding its breath. He poured more wine into my glass, watching the liquid ripple and multiply in every mirrored surface. Then he stood a few feet away, glass in hand, not sitting, just watching. I tried to focus on the food. I took a bite to break the silence. It was good, actually. Creamy, perfectly seasoned. But each time I lifted my fork, I saw it reflected from every angle, my mouth opening, my throat swallowing, my eyes darting nervously around the room. It was like being surrounded by silent witnesses. The only sounds were the scrape of my fork against the plate and the faint clink of his wine glass. After a while, I couldn't take it anymore. I dropped the fork just to make some noise that wasn't a reflection of myself. It clattered against the plate and rolled off the edge. He moved instantly, too fast, bending to pick it up before I could. His fingers brushed mine when he set it back on the plate. They were cold. Careful, he said softly. You don't want to hurt yourself. I nodded, forcing a small smile. Right, thanks. My reflection mirrored that smile 100 times over, each one looking a little more strained. I took one last bite, then set the fork down deliberately. I'm full, I said. That was great. He didn't move. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. You haven't even tried dessert. I shook my head. I really should get going. Early morning. He sighed, almost sadly. It's rude to leave when someone's made something special for you. The tone was still calm, but there was something under it now, something sharper. My pulse thudded in my ears. I really appreciate it, I said quickly, grabbing my bag. It was lovely, really. For a moment, he didn't respond. Then he nodded once slow, if you insist. I stood, almost knocking the chair back. My own movement fractured in the mirrors, 100 versions of me turning toward the door. The lock felt stiff under my fingers. I twisted it once, twice. Nothing. My heart jumped. I glanced over my shoulder. He was still standing by the table, glass of wine in hand, watching silently. The third try, the latch finally clicked. The door opened with a rush of cold night air, and I stepped through so fast I nearly tripped. I muttered a thank you over my shoulder, not daring to look directly at him. I didn't breathe until I was in my car with the doors locked. Driving away, my headlights caught the front window for just a second, and I swore I saw movement, a flicker of light across glass. Maybe it was just the mirrors catching my reflection one last time, or maybe he was standing there watching the way he'd watched the whole night. At home, I sat in silence, the image replaying in my head, that single plate, those mirrored walls, my own face surrounding me as he stood still in the corner. A room built to reflect everything but him. That was the last time I ever let anyone insist on cooking for me. She looked exactly like her photos. That was the first relief. No catfish, no weird surprises, no awkward moment of pretending not to notice the difference between filters and reality. Same dark hair, same easy smile, even the same green jacket she'd worn in one of her profile pictures. I remember thinking, finally, one that's real. She spotted me before I could wave, gliding through the doorway of the quiet bar with this unhurried confidence. The place was softly lit, shadows pooling in the corners, music just low enough that people actually had to talk instead of shout. She slid into the booth across from me, smiled wide, and it felt instantly easy, like we'd known each other longer than 2 weeks. At first, everything lined up perfectly. She laughed at the same inside jokes we'd already shared in messages. She teased me about how nervous I looked, the way I kept fiddling with my sleeve. She even remembered my go-to-drink order. When the waitress came by, she ordered hers, I ordered mine, and I finally let myself relax. Conversation flowed. She was funny in the same effortless way she'd been online, sharp but not mean, playful but thoughtful. She told stories about bad dates, about growing up by the coast, about working in design. It all tracked. The tone, the rhythm, the details, exactly like our chats. But about halfway through, something shifted. It started small. I asked about her job again, the design firm she'd said she worked for, and she tilted her head slightly, smiling like I'd caught her in a trivia game. Then she said she didn't actually work in design at all. She was in retail. I laughed at first, thinking she was joking, but she didn't laugh. She just swirled her drink, ice clinking softly, and said maybe she'd been trying out something new. I blinked. You said you loved design. She shrugged, eyes flicking past me toward the bar. Maybe I changed my mind. The words didn't sound defensive, just detached, like it didn't matter whether it was true or not. A minute later, I asked about her city, the one she'd said she lived in. She smiled again, that same calm smile, and said she didn't live there anymore, that she never had actually. Now I was confused. You said your apartment was right near the train station. She looked amused. Did I? My stomach sank a little. The room suddenly felt warmer. I told myself maybe she was just being flirty, teasing, seeing how I'd react. But the way she said it, so flat, so casual, made my pulse skip. Then I asked about her name, the one I've been calling her for weeks. She smirked, leaned forward until her elbows rested on the table, and whispered a completely different name. The air went still. I thought maybe I'd misheard, but she said it again, slower this time. I stared at her. What? She sat back, smiling wider. That's my real name. My mind spun. Then who have I been talking to? Her tone didn't change. Me. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. She lifted her glass, took a slow sip, and said something I'll never forget. I like being whoever they want me to be. Her eyes locked on mine when she said it, steady, unblinking. The corners of her mouth curved just enough to look like a smile, but it wasn't warmth. It was precision. My skin prickled. I tried to joke, something about how that sounded like a lot of work. She shook her head, still smiling. It's fun, she said. You learn what people want, what they need. It's easy once you know what they're looking for. She told me she'd been a nurse once, a teacher once, even a musician for a while. She said it like she was listing old outfits she'd outgrown. Every once sounded like a chapter she'd close without warning. Then she asked, do you like me more as who I am now or who I was when we started talking? Her tone was light, but her eyes weren't. I couldn't answer. I didn't know how. My throat had gone dry. She leaned closer, just a little. You can tell me the truth. Something about the way she said it made my pulse hammer. I forced a smile, muttered something about liking both, but even I could hear the uncertainty in my voice. She sat back, satisfied. That's sweet. The waitress brought another round of drinks. I didn't touch mine. The rest of the night blurred. She talked, stories, anecdotes, half-formed confessions, and I listened, trying to piece together who she actually was. Every detail contradicted another. Every memory she shared overlapped with something she'd already told me, but slightly wrong, like a song played half a step off key. I stopped trying to keep up. At one point she asked if I wanted to come over after. Her voice was smooth, inviting. My instinct screamed no, and muttered something about having an early morning. Her smile flickered for the first time, the edges tightening. But just as quickly she let it soften again. Another time, she said. When the check came, I grabbed it before she could reach. I didn't even look at the total, just shoved my card toward the waitress, wanting to end it. While I signed the receipt, she watched me quietly, chin propped on her hand. There was something in her expression I couldn't name. Amusement, maybe. Pity, like she already knew I'd never see her again. We stood outside together for a moment, the air cold and sharp. Streetlights flickered on the wet pavement, stretching her shadow along beside mine. She smiled again, her first smile, the one from her pictures. For a heartbeat, it almost looked real. Then she leaned close, hugged me lightly, and whispered the fake name in my ear, the one she'd used at first. It was nice meeting you, she said. Then she turned and walked down the street, her green jacket fading into the dark until she was gone. I stood there for a long time, watching the empty sidewalk, feeling like I had just woken up from someone else's dream. When I got home, I sat on my couch and opened our messages. Read every conversation, every joke, every emoji. It all looked different now. Empty. Artificial. The person I'd been talking to, whoever she was, felt like a ghost wearing someone else's skin. I typed her name into social media. Nothing. Tried the second name she whispered. Nothing. No profiles, no photos, no trace. It was like she'd never existed at all. I checked my phone again, half expecting a message from her, some final word, something to prove she was real. Nothing came. Eventually, I put the phone face down on the table and sat in the quiet. The hum of the refrigerator sounded too loud. My reflection in the black TV screen looked unfamiliar. And in that moment, it hit me. The only thing I ever knew for certain about her was that she looked exactly like her photos. And maybe that had been the point all along. The date itself was boring. That's what stuck with me at first. Nothing dramatic, nothing creepy, just dull. Dinner at a burger spot with sticky tables and dim lighting. He talked a lot about me, my work, my family, my playlists, but said almost nothing about himself. I remember thinking it was strange how curious he seemed, but at least he was polite. He smiled often, listened well, asked follow-up questions that made me feel like he really read my dating profile carefully. When we said goodbye, he didn't try to push for anything, no awkward lean-in, no insistence on walking me to my car. Just a casual wave and a text me when you get home safe. I didn't text him. I figured that was that. Another forgettable first date. The next night, though, my phone started acting strange. It began with little things, tiny glitches you normally shrug off. My screen froze while typing a message. A few texts I hadn't opened suddenly showed as read. My camera app flickered open by itself while I was scrolling through photos. It only lasted a second, just long enough for me to catch my own startled face before it closed. I left it off. My phone was old. It had been acting up for weeks. That night, I plugged it in, turned out the lights, and was just drifting off when my smart speaker came alive. The soft blue ring lit up, spinning slowly like it does when it's listening. I waited for it to ask something, maybe a software update, but it stayed silent, just that steady circle of light. "Stop," I said groggily. Nothing. The light kept turning. Then a voice came through. Calm, familiar, male. He said my name. Just my name. Slowly, clearly, like he was sitting in the room. I froze. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might throw up. The light faded. The room went dark again. I didn't move for a full minute before I finally scrambled out of bed, yanked the plug from the wall, and shoved the speaker into the dresser drawer. I sat there for hours, staring at it like it might start glowing again. I told myself it had to be some weird glitch, voice recognition error, wrong device connection, something technical I didn't understand. But the next morning proved otherwise. When I woke up, my phone buzzed with a flood of notifications. Not texts, alerts. My smart home app was full of new device connections. Thermostat added, front camera and doorbell added, lighting system linked. Each one was labeled voice linked, not to me, to a name I recognized immediately. His name. My mouth went dry. My hands trembled as I opened the app. Under recognized users, it listed us both. Me and him. My breath stuttered. I deleted his profile, reset everything, changed every password I could think of. For a few hours afterward, the silence in my apartment felt like safety. Until sunset. I was walking past the kitchen when the overhead lights flickered once, twice, then shifted from soft white to deep red. My pulse leaped. Before I could move, the drawer I'd shoved the speaker into began to glow faintly from inside. It was unplugged. The blue ring pulsed weakly through the wood. Then his voice came again, muffled but unmistakable. "I like the blue hoodie," he said. The one I was wearing right then. I didn't think. I ripped the drawer open, grabbed the device, and hurled it against the wall. It shattered, plastic scattering across the tile. But even lying in pieces, the light didn't die completely. The center flickered, faint but alive like a heartbeat. I backed away, grabbed my phone, and tried to call someone. Anyone, but the screen glitched. It went black, then flashed white, then opened to the camera. For half a second, I saw myself on the screen. Disheveled, terrified. Then the image froze and flipped. The camera turned as if to show the opposite side of the room, except no one was there. Then laughter crackled through the shattered speaker. I slammed my phone face down on the counter. When I picked it up again, it was off. Wouldn't turn back on. The next few days blurred together. I reset every device, deleted every app, bought new cables, new passwords, even called my service provider. They said they couldn't see any unauthorized access. Probably just a sync error, the technician told me. But the signs kept returning. My thermostat would click on at random hours, the temperature climbing to stifling heat. My TV turned on by itself one night, screen filled with static. My disconnected doorbell camera buzzed faintly whenever I walked by. Every time I checked my settings, there he was again, his name reappearing in the list of authorized users. I stopped sleeping. I unplugged everything I could. But there's only so much you can turn off in a smart home. You start to realize how much is connected, how much is listening. One night, around 2 a.m., I woke to my phone lighting up beside me. A FaceTime call. His name on the screen. I didn't answer. It rang once, twice, then stopped. A minute later, it rang again, and again. I turned the phone face down and pressed my hands over my ears, but the sound still filled the room, the vibration against the nightstand, the faint echo from the speaker, the relentless persistence of it. When it finally stopped, I lay there shaking, staring at the ceiling, telling myself it had to be a prank. But the next morning, when I opened my photos, I found pictures of myself. Dozens of them, taken while I slept. Each one from slightly different angles, like the phone had been moved. I deleted them all, factory reset the phone, wiped every device again. For a few hours, I thought maybe that was it. Maybe I'd finally outrun whatever this was. Then, sitting in my living room, I noticed my reflection in the black TV screen. I looked pale, exhausted Paulo. I reached for the remote, then froze. The thermostat clicked. The air conditioner turned off. Then heat. Blasting. Too hot. Too fast. My phone buzzed in my hand. A notification from the smart home app I hadn't been able to uninstall completely. It said one word: welcome home. The vents hummed louder. The walls seemed to breathe. I didn't stay to see what happened next. 2 weeks later, I moved out. New number, new devices. No smart anything, just a lock and a key. Sometimes, though, when I turn out the lights at night, I swear I can still see a faint blue reflection in the window, like a tiny ring of light, listening, waiting. She seemed normal at first. That's the part that still messes with me. When you meet someone off a dating app, you expect a bit of awkwardness, forced laughs, polite smiles, maybe a drink you regret ordering. But she wasn't like that. She walked in confident, smiling like we'd already known each other, and slid into the booth across from me with a kind of ease that made it feel like our third date, not our first. Her energy was calm, smooth. It put me at ease. Too much ease, maybe. The first red flag came early, though I didn't recognize it as one. We were talking about hobbies, just small talk, which she mentioned my gym. By name. She said it like it was a place we both knew, something familiar. I blinked at how she knew it, and she smiled, brushed it off, said it was a guess. I didn't think twice. Then she mentioned my dog. Not your dog or a dog, but my dog by name. The one I use when I'm calling him in from the yard or whispering to him half asleep. I froze for half a second, then laughed it off. Maybe I'd mentioned him in messages. Maybe I'd posted a photo. She said she must have seen it somewhere and left it at that. But then came my friend. She dropped his name into the conversation like we all hung out together. She knew where he worked. She mentioned his birthday party from last month. My stomach started to twist. And then she said something that stopped me cold, where my mom lived. Not just the city, the neighborhood. That's when it hit me that I'd never told her any of this. I asked how she knew so much, and she tilted her head slightly, that easy smile still on her face. I've been following you for a while, she said. This just saved me the effort. My chest hollowed out. She didn't laugh, didn't flinch, didn't even blink. She said it like she was complimenting the food. I tried to smile, to play it off like a joke, but my throat tightened. I asked what she meant, and she just kept talking, so calmly, so sure. She told me she'd seen me long before the app. At the gym, at the park, outside my building. She said she liked how predictable I was. That word hit like a nail. Predictable. She listed everything off like she was reading a script she'd memorized, my routes, my schedule, my habits. She even mentioned my favorite parking spot behind the building. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but I couldn't. My legs felt locked under the table. At one point she leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand, and said softly, I like finally being this close. Watching from far away wasn't enough anymore. Her voice was low, steady, and for a second I thought she might reach across the table. When the check came, I didn't even think. I dropped cash on the table, mumbled something about having to go. She didn't try to stop me. She just smiled, that same knowing smile, and said, I'll see you soon. Not if, not maybe, soon. The word crawled under my skin. Outside, the air was sharp, the night too quiet. My hands shook as I unlocked my car. I drove home glancing at the mirrors every few seconds, convinced her car was right behind me, even though it wasn't. When I pulled up to my apartment, I sat in the car for a long time, staring at my windows. The lights glowed faintly, like someone had just turned them off. My stomach turned as I wondered if she'd been out there before watching. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the building, every flicker of headlights made me flinch. Around 2 a.m., I finally drifted off with the lamp still on. When my phone buzzed, the sound jolted me upright. A new message, her name on the screen. No words, just a photo. It was me, taken earlier that day, unlocking my car. The shot was angled slightly from across the street, zoomed in enough that you could see the reflection of my face in the window. She'd been there, watching, and she wanted me to know. I stared at the image until my vision blurred. My chest felt too tight to breathe. I blocked her number, deleted the app, deleted my account. Then I sat there, phone in my lap, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did, not that night. But it didn't stop. The next morning, when I went to walk my dog, I noticed footprints near my building's side gate. Small, precise, not mine. My neighbor's car windshield had a single handprint on it, too small to be his. That night, I heard something outside my window. Just one light tap, then another. I froze in bed listening. My dog's ears perked up, his body rigid beside me. When I finally worked up the nerve to peek through the blinds, no one was there. The next day, I asked the gym to check their security footage. They said the cameras in the lot hadn't been working for weeks. Every night after that, I thought I saw her car. Different models, different colors, but always the same feeling. A car parked too long across the street. Headlights off, engine running. Sometimes, when I looked twice, it was gone. After a week, I stopped sleeping. I moved my dresser in front of the window. I checked the locks 3 times before bed. My dog wouldn't leave my side. I started noticing things missing. Little things. A spare key that wasn't where I'd left it. A gym towel from my bag. My hoodie. Each morning, something felt slightly off. A chair angled wrong. A cabinet half open. The night I decided to leave, I walked out to my car and froze. Under the windshield wiper was a folded napkin. My heart hammered as I'd opened it. Inside, written in perfect handwriting, were 3 words. Not so predictable. I didn't go back upstairs. I drove until sunrise, until my hands stopped shaking, until I found a cheap motel 2 towns over. I never went back to that apartment. I never went back to the gym. And I never, ever checked that dating app again.